everyone, and welcome back to the Inner Podcast, where you get to embrace your inner nerd. I'm your host, Brandon.
And I'm your host, Aaron.
How are you doing today, Aaron?
It's hot.
It is hot.
And I don't like it.
I should have turned on a fan or something.
Yeah, I was not prepared for... It's only going to be a couple of days of heat. I think today's the last day. It's supposed to go back down to the 60s starting tomorrow.
Sweet.
And most of next week. But that's the only reason I didn't bring out my air conditioners. But
yeah,
it's hot, and I'm not looking forward to summertime.
I'm also not looking forward to having... I mean, don't get me wrong, it's fine having the AC in here and everything, but it's so loud.
It's loud, and having it on all of the time is I don't know. It's like the white noise you didn't ask for.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, it doesn't bother me. It only bothers me when it's when I'm recording
right
stuff. I've gotten so accustomed to these heaters that are so quiet.
Yeah.
Now I have to deal with this AC that's
yeah, I'm not looking forward to rather, getting back into the routine where I have to turn my AC down or off completely for the hour that I have to record or whatever. Right. And then turn it back on, and it take that much time for it to cool back down.
Right.
And whatever.
And you're recording while it's super hot.
Yeah.
PC's blaring heat.
Yeah. So, and that's another thing. Me building my PC, I've done a bunch of research on PCs and stuff, but nothing tells you about the situation I'm in, where I'm purely relying on portable ACs,
right,
that barely do anything. So it's if my place is I can do everything I can to make sure that the cooling of the PC and the fans in the PC are optimized and whatnot.
Right.
But what happens when my place on its own reaches the high 80s, mid 90s? Even with two air conditioners on.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that.
Yeah, so.
Fun.
Anyways, how about you?
I'm tired. Past couple days have been really long. I woke up not feeling so good today. Sick.
Oh.
And I was super nauseous and had a huge headache, and I was debating on even going to work.
Gotcha.
But I went through with it, and I'm not going to lie. I tried throwing out these hints in the beginning of the first half of the day towards my boss to try to see if maybe he would let me go home.
Yeah.
Because I'd much rather be sick and go there and then them tell me to go home instead of calling out sick.
Yeah.
But he wasn't catching on.
Right.
So I suffered throughout the day. And then there was one point when he wanted me to start doing stuff, and I'm like, I would, but with how I'm feeling right now. And he was like, oh, right. So...
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's annoying.
Yeah.
I hate being sick. And what's so annoying is that this past winter that we went through, I'm not normally someone who gets sick often.
Same.
But I got sick a ridiculous amount of times.
That might be my fault, because realistically, I don't get sick that often. But when you have kids...
Yeah,
you get sick a lot.
Interacting with Henry. Yeah, that actually would make a lot of sense, because a lot of the weekends I had to call out were following when I saw Henry.
Right.
But aside from just that, just being sick in general is annoying.
Yeah.
When you're someone who doesn't get sick often, because it really just kicks your ass.
Not only that, but it's always at the worst time. It's during the week when you have to go to work.
Yeah.
It can't be over the weekend or anything like that.
Right. And not only that, but the past two... So in the beginning of the winter, and then at the end of the winter, I ended up catching, relatively small colds, but I ended up having this cough that stayed with me for weeks.
Yeah.
Both times. And I'm finally getting out of it now, but I'm sure listeners probably heard the past couple times, I'd have to put the microphone away from me and
Yeah.
cough to the side because it's crazy. And
Right.
I don't know. It's just annoying. I hate being sick.
Me too.
I mean, that could be said for anyone, but yeah.
We get what Casey calls the man flu, like because we're not sick that often. When we do get sick, it, like you said, it really kicks us in the ass.
Yeah.
So we're like super weak and we feel like garbage.
Yeah.
And she would always make comments like what I'm able to do when I'm not sick, and then like I act like as if I need like 5 caregivers when I am sick.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. I don't do it on purpose, but I'm miserable when I'm sick.
Same.
And I don't know what to do about it. And I don't want to use it as an excuse.
Right.
But she doesn't. I don't think she believes me till this day when I actually get sick, like how miserable I am. She's like, well, I don't feel good either when I'm sick, but I still do stuff. And I'm like, I don't know how.
No, when
It's
I'm
crippling for me.
yeah, when I'm sick, even if it's like, I mean, obviously, if it's just like a cold, like a head cold,
Yeah.
and you're just like congested, obviously, like even if I'm able to just put a mask on and go to work, like obviously I have to go to work.
Right.
But normally when I'm sick and it's not just a head cold, same thing. My body like will ache and I'll just be so mad at everyone in the world
Yeah.
and myself and the pillow that I just got off of that
Yeah.
like, you know, why did you do this to me?
Right.
You know, like I trusted you.
Yeah.
And yeah. See? No, that wasn't actually me being sick. I just ate greasy food. Yeah, so it all sucks.
It sucks.
One quick little thing before we get onto our topic today, because we're gonna kind of just jump into it. I had to. It's a relatively long story, but as I just told you a little bit ago before we started recording, I had to cancel an order because of some issues and go buy a power supply at Best Buy today. And it's been a while since I've had to like do a relatively big purchase in a store like that before, like that on one thing.
Yeah.
Not like groceries that can sometimes be a couple $100, but there's something kind of satisfying. Maybe it's because it's been so long, but it used to be the other way around. I used to hate going to stores and getting stuff, and it would be super satisfying when you could order stuff and like open up the package.
Right.
But something seemed really satisfying about like going to Best Buy, finding the power supply that I needed, and checking it out and bringing it in my truck and be like, look, I got it. Boom, boom.
I think
it's right here.
Take for granted the satisfaction of like actually like going somewhere and shopping
Yeah.
for something, because like it's so easy to just online shop these days.
Right.
And sure, it is convenient, but like it also comes with the biggest downside is like delivery issues. Like, oh, are they going to be able to deliver it?
Yeah.
Are they even going to tell me beforehand if it's going to require me to be there, or can they just drop it off?
Yeah.
So
that's always really annoying too, is when, because Amazon sometimes they pass the order off to a different like delivery service.
right.
Which has happened a few times with these expensive orders, but that specific delivery service, you know, one, when it gets passed over, they don't get the instructions, or two, sometimes they require different things that Amazon doesn't,
Right.
such as, like you said, a signature for a particular item.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't know that, and they keep calling you being like, hey, we tried to drop it off. And it's like, then why didn't you? And then they're like, oh, well, we needed a signature. And I was like, since when?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Also, I'm just going to throw this out real quick. Super random, but yesterday, a couple of my friends gave you compliments about your hair.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, just want
I was actually feeling kind of self-conscious about it the other day, but...
Oh, yeah, no, you got compliments.
Nice, dude. But Brandon, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're talking about something a little bit more specific, but there's still something leeway just due to how big it is.
It's like a broad topic, and then we're going to be narrowing it down to something more specific.
Sure.
Well,
yeah. We're talking about Assassin's Creed today.
Right. That's what I mean. So we're talking about Assassin's Creed.
Right.
And then we're going to narrow it down to Shadows.
Yeah. It's going to be kind of hard. Well, I wouldn't say hard. It's just, it won't be as in depth with Shadows, only because Aaron and I, as of recording this, we just got Shadows.
Yeah, it just came out on Thursday. The
20th.
The 20th.
Yeah. And we've only you've played a little bit more than I have, but we've both put in some hours into it, but we're nowhere near completing the game.
Oh yeah, no.
So we can't give our like full-fledged opinion and rating on the game or anything like that.
Yeah,
but,
because we're adults who have jobs and we have things to do.
Right.
So
but we can at least put in our like first impression reviews, I guess, and we can still have a nice chat about the other games in the franchise, because me personally, I mean, you know this, but not only did we both grow up with Assassin's Creed, but Assassin's Creed, it's a little sad for me to say this, used to be my like number one favorite franchise of all time.
Yeah.
When I thought about video games, I thought about Assassin's Creed.
Well, yeah.
And it was my bread and butter, and just like how we've done with other franchises and stuff, I spent so much time of my life invested into the lore and everything there was to know about Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
But it started getting to a certain point to where their games pushed me away. And I say that like as if they were all intended for me, but just for the sake of this conversation.
Yeah, but you and a lot of other, OG Assassin's Creed fans.
Yeah.
But
I still have different opinions on some of the older games than other OG Assassin's Creed fans, which is so weird because they all have the same opinions but me.
Yeah. I do want to just say that this is kind of... I don't remember over on my channel.
Yeah.
When Assassin's Creed Mirage came out, we did a video.
Yeah.
That was kind of similar. We talked about some Assassin's Creed stuff, and then we talked about Mirage. But I don't remember jack shit about what we said.
I don't think we really talked about the franchise that much. I think it was like maybe a couple minutes of the franchise, and then the rest of that whole hour and a half was Mirage.
Maybe, yeah. I do think...
But this gives us the opportunity to talk more about the franchise, and just a little bit about Shadows.
Right. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case for whatever reason we repeat ourselves. If anyone had been...
Yeah, I didn't watch that video. I should have. I didn't watch that video before this.
I didn't either.
So I don't remember what
I just remembered as I was coming home today. I was like, we did do an Assassin's Creed video, but it was...
Casey and I were actually watching your channel a couple days ago after Henry's birthday. We were kind of just like looking through some of your videos, and then we came across that one, and I'm like, oh, I forgot we did that.
Yeah.
And we stopped doing that. I mean, you took your hiatus, but like we were doing like a month after this game came out and whatnot.
Yeah, we did.
I guess we could technically do that here.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea, because after that Spider-Man video, I thought like it was when we were originally talking about doing the podcast.
Right.
I was like, we might as well just kind of continue where we left off from there.
Yeah.
But the thing is the podcast kind of gives us more of an opportunity to talk about more things, so we just kind of haven't gotten to that point yet.
Right.
But yeah, again, I was just throwing that out there in case we repeat ourselves. It's whatever. It doesn't matter. But yeah, like you said, I don't want to say we're like day one fans of Assassin's Creed, because that's not true.
No.
Because we started Brotherhood.
Yeah, so because it was something... I remember seeing posters for it at GameStop.
Yeah.
And I couldn't care about it at all. And one day, our mom was like, "Oh, I want to start playing video games with you guys."
Yeah.
And I thought this game looked cool. And we're like, "Oh, mom's so lame." And she wanted us to play this game. And she wanted us to figure the game out before showing her. Which, by the way, she played once in her entire life.
Yeah.
And she hated it.
Again, mom's not lame. Because she sometimes listens in, so I'm just gonna be like, no, she's not lame. But little kid us at the time were like, oh, mom,
yeah,
you don't want to play games.
But yeah, so we fell in love with Brotherhood, and it was our introduction to the franchise.
Yeah,
and then we
fell in love,
right? And then we started to backtrack.
Right, we played 2.
We played 2, and then we played 1, which was kind of nice because not only did we get like refreshed on the origin of Ezio, but we also got to see where the whole thing like took off from.
Yeah, like piecing it all together and whatnot.
Yeah, and obviously we were young, so there was a lot we didn't quite understand like right off the bat. I don't think it was until years later where we truly understood not only like the connection of each character, the time gaps,
yeah,
and how like the significance of like Ezio's story and Altair. And
right.
It also took me, because we replayed Assassin's Creed 2 who knows how many times.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Like, I think it's the most I've ever replayed a game ever, for me personally.
Okay,
but I think it wasn't until like the 10th or 11th time when I realized that the span of the whole Assassin's Creed 2 game took place within the span of like 10 to 12 years.
Yeah, it's a pretty long time.
Because Ezio, there's a time when they're in Venice, and he talks about how it's been like 8 years since the death of his father and brothers. And I was like, wait a minute, 8 years? How long does this game, like, the time in this game, like, how long does it take place within? It's
right.
Crazy.
Yeah, with time, like how it's been with some games that, like, I've backtracked to and replayed. With time, we definitely, like, things started to click.
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed's not designed for kids as young as we were when we started Assassin's Creed. So which is a given. But yeah, so as time went, that's one of the things we found really enjoyable, at least for me, with Assassin's Creed, because like as we both became like big lore buffs, Assassin's Creed offered that.
Yeah.
Like there was more to discover, like finally going through like the files and the memories and like learning more and like exploring more outside of the Animus and so on and so forth.
And it was always nice that Assassin's Creed, although I won't say it's like 100% realistic,
right?
Because there's definitely things that they stretched, but like there are things that you don't really like think about while like just playing the game. But what I liked is that it was more towards realism with just a hint of like science fiction.
Yeah.
But that's all I ever needed was a hint. And I bring that up because of a conversation that will like that this will lead to later on. But okay, so quick question, and this is like a given question, especially for how big the franchise is. What's your favorite Assassin's Creed game of all time? Your number one.
Of all of them?
You could replay it as like over and over again. It's your go-to. It's the one you think about when you think of Assassin's Creed.
See, those are two different things.
Okay, well, I get that's how I see it. Like whenever you think of like when you think of the franchise, your favorite one comes to mind first, but then you think of other stuff later. But overall, what's your favorite Assassin's Creed?
That's tough because I go back and forth between Brotherhood and Rogue all the time.
That's interesting. I have a similar answer, not like the choices, but I've always had a hard time choosing between one or another for different reasons.
When To answer the question though, like what do I think of when I think of Assassin's Creed? I think of Brotherhood. I think of like
fair.
I think of like that cinematic trailer of like that really like punched out lighting and the assassins like in like super elegant white and red like garbs with eccentric but like protective armor. Italy. I mean, obviously it doesn't have to be Italy, but more just Brotherhood, like that setting. It really gives the Assassin's Creed feel for me. Like, yeah. So when I think of Assassin's Creed, like if someone were to say the words Assassin's Creed, Brotherhood pops up.
Right.
Like the when he's like walking endlessly in the Animus, like between loading or the main menu screen or like the menu like sound effects and stuff, all of that. Desmond, that's what I think of with Assassin's Creed.
Yeah. It's interesting because the game that comes to mind when I think of Assassin's Creed, like Brotherhood definitely comes to mind, but a lot of the time, the first game that comes to mind when I think of Assassin's Creed as a whole is Unity. The main reason is for the same reason why Brotherhood comes to mind, is because I don't just think of it as like when I think of like the main character, I think of what Assassin's Creed is in the universe, like a brotherhood, this like guild of assassins, and you really get that in not only Brotherhood but in Unity. So like I think of like the first cinematic trailer for Unity that came out.
That was a great trailer.
It was so good. They had my favorite trailer for that was the
execution one.
Yeah,
I was just about to say
like
I think I like that one more.
Yeah. But wait, did you say what your favorite one was? Like, could you choose between the two?
If I had to choose, see, that's another thing that's tough because Brotherhood has a great story.
Oh yeah,
narrative-wise, setting, all of that is awesome.
Right.
But Rogue has like, at least for me, has great replayability.
Okay.
Like you can kind of approach the game differently each time you play. And I really like Shay, and I like the aesthetic of like the I like the snowy landscape
kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm gonna just say Brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say like that's like my that's a great go-to Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, there again, any of the Ezio games are just like, it's like
I mean those are the standard. That's
they set the standard for Assassin's Creed.
Right.
But because of that, which is why I have a somewhat similar answer, the two games that I have a hard time choosing between my favorites are Assassin's Creed 2 and Assassin's Creed 3.
3.
Yeah, which, by the way, I'm going to say this right now, and it's irritated me for the same reason that our movie video irritates me. A lot of people gave Assassin's Creed 3 so much shit when it first came out, but now there's a lot of people who say that it's their favorite Assassin's Creed game.
That's pretty common with Assassin's Creed games, especially since Assassin's Creed 3.
I mean, I still hear more people say that Black Flag is their favorite Assassin's Creed.
IGN says that it's the best Assassin's Creed game.
I think as far as like how much hype it got and like publishing and whatnot, it did really well. But I still, till this day, don't understand how that's people's favorite. Me personally, and I know me and you have different opinions on it, I hate naval combat. Hate it.
Okay.
So much. And the only reason why I tolerate it in Assassin's Creed 3 is because it's minimal. Because it's not needed in the story that much. It's only like tidbits. That's it. And then like if you want to, they had the whole side mission thing where you could go do more, but you don't have to. But Black Flag, it felt like it was 90% naval and like 10% Assassin's Creed stuff.
Yeah.
Which I'm not a fan of. But so Assassin's Creed 2, I feel like that's just obvious. Like, I don't even need to explain myself. There's so many good things about Assassin's Creed 2.
Mm-hmm.
It not only like it took what would all the great things about the first game and just made it better. The storyline was great. The casting was awesome. Ezio's a badass, and you get to see him grow from this immature teenager to this like noble assassin.
Yeah.
And the journey he goes through, the cities that he visits, the ups and downs, and it's like this whole, it's like his own odyssey, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
And it had a great way of representing how the Assassin's Creed itself changed throughout the years compared to the first game.
Yeah, and just a lifespan of one guy.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's so great. And obviously, like, the weapons that you can use, the gameplay is simple but fun.
Right.
It was awesome. And like the places you could like explore as an assassin, and like the mechanics of climbing made it so entertaining. And yeah, I mean, it's actually some of the same reasons why I like Assassin's Creed 2 are the same reasons why I like 3, because 3 was the first of the Colonial trilogy. Is that what they called it? And it still felt like a lot of the same things from 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations.
Yeah.
But just like slightly altered. Like just slightly different movements and mechanics. Slightly different combat.
Yeah.
But it was all still essentially the same. But we were introduced to a brand new character, which was rare for Assassin's Creed back then.
Right.
Because aside from Altair, every Assassin's Creed game was Ezio, Ezio, Ezio. So now we're being introduced to a new assassin years later, like centuries later. And it's not only cool because like Ezio had his whole revenge arc, but it kind of spread off into like these other journeys and these other people that he had to like fight and kill for the Assassin's Creed.
Right.
But Connor, it was this really cool revenge story that had like the list. Like, it was one of the first times where it's like, okay, I have a list of people who I'm going to kill throughout my life.
Yeah.
And despite what anyone says about Connor, I thought he was a badass. It was a really cool combination of adding another culture into the Creed and how he like mixed both native methods and tactics with the assassin's way. And it was just so well done. I thought his suit was sick, and they introduced a new hidden blade, which has just recently been reused in Shadows. But that was also the first game to start doing a new character per game, a new hidden blade per game.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. There wasn't anything special about Edward's hidden blade, but
there's something they did with Assassin's Creed 3 that I wish another game was ballsy enough to do. And so Assassin's Creed 3, way after its release, I think it was, I want to say it was maybe a year. I could be getting this all wrong, but I'm just purely going off of memory. There was an expansion to Assassin's Creed 3 that was like that altered history thing when like George Washington became like
a king,
like a dictator.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about. Like, Assassin's Creed is already like an altered history, but they kind of put it in the format of like the history you don't know.
Right. Like it all happened the same way, but there's just certain minor details that they forgot to add into the history books.
Right. And that's like the way Assassin's Creed's always approached it. But I do like when they have a little fun with it.
Yeah.
And they did like that altered history thing. I'd like to see another Assassin's Creed, you know, in like an expansion.
Yeah.
Or even in the main game, like maybe it's something with like the Animus or something like that. And they kind of explore like the very specific situation that character's in, or like setting, and doing like an alternative version of that.
I used to really miss Assassin's Creed and like their full-fledged expansion campaigns.
Yeah.
Because Assassin's Creed had that like altered history. Unity had the weird
Oh yeah, it was like the weird like I forgot what it was called, but you go to a different part of France.
you go back to his hometown.
And, yeah, and it's like all decrepit. Napoleon's like you're essentially like a Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
Because you're going down into like these deep tombs and uncover like a ancient Sinew
but it's
site.
like it's a whole new tiny campaign.
Yeah. And it had like its giant expansive map and side missions and
yeah, I know that Valhalla and Odyssey had their stuff, but it went too far into the things I didn't like about that trilogy. Assassin's Creed Origins actually had a really cool one. They had like the Hidden Ones expansion, which essentially was just Bayek during a time when he was actually leading the Hidden Ones. And for those of you who don't know, the Hidden Ones is what the Assassin's Creed used to be called.
Right.
Before they were referred to as assassins. But yeah, it wasn't like anything mystical or anything like that. It was just Bayek as like an actual like headmaster and leading his division and actually doing like Assassin's Creed stuff.
Right.
So, but I think to answer the question, I personally want to say Assassin's Creed 3 is my favorite.
Gotcha.
Like, Assassin's Creed 2 is really good, but I don't know. There's always a really special place in my heart for 3.
Yeah. 3, I don't have any particular attachments to 3. I personally, 3 was actually... I wouldn't say it's one of my least favorites, but I'm just not as fond of it as some other Assassin's Creed fans are.
That's fair.
But I would say there is something that I do kind of reminisce about Assassin's Creed 3. I don't know how to describe the feeling. I guess it's something just very nostalgic. But I remember after Assassin's Creed Revelations, it was not long after. I almost want to look this up or maybe do some research to find out. But I remember it wasn't long after Assassin's Creed Revelations came out that like the cover art or like concept for Assassin's Creed 3 was leaked or something. Because I remember we went to Rachel's place and she had an apartment at the time, and her boyfriend at the time like heard us talking about Assassin's Creed, and he like pulled out his phone and he showed us a picture of Connor, and we were like, that's fake. He's Native American. Like it might be Ezio or something. Like we thought maybe Ezio's... We weren't under the impression that there would be a different assassin.
Yeah.
So we were like, but he's Native American. Like,
that was weird. The phone just made a weird noise.
Yeah, that was weird.
Weird.
Anyways, yeah, so I just to wrap up this little story, I just remember thinking like, you know, that it has to be fake.
Yeah.
But lo and behold, it wasn't long after that we started seeing like trailers and
Oh, that was during Game Informer time.
Oh, God, I miss the game. When we were at GameStop picking up Assassin's Creed, I saw a Game Informer up on the counter, and I was just thinking, I was like, I think it would be in my best interest to maybe start collecting Game Informers. I already have a stack that goes up to like my knee.
Yeah,
I just need the rest of them.
Religious for us to like get the new Game Informer, look at what they were announcing. It was kind of like it was our way at the time of being introduced to the new games that were coming out.
Yeah.
And like if we saw something that we haven't heard of, we'd look up the trailer for it or whatever. Like, oh, man.
Yeah, now YouTube and social media is just kind of taking that over.
Yeah.
But and then moving on from 3, kind of got into the end of that colonial era of Assassin's Creed. So I don't want to talk about Black Flag too much because you don't like Black Flag. Or at least, like I said about 3, it's not favored for you. And even though there's probably, if there is anyone listening who is like a giant Black Flag fan, that's just them. I don't have a lot to say about Black Flag.
Mm-hmm.
When I play it, I get it. I get like it looks crazy different from any other Assassin's Creed we've played. We're playing as a character that's new, and he's like, yeah, Ezio was like charming, but he was like charming in like a sexy way, you know? Whilst like Edward was just like
scruff.
He was scruff, and he was, if you think about it, even it's not a good analogy, but if you thought about like Ezio being like book smarts, Edward was the street smarts.
Right.
He was just charming in a different way. He was sarcastic. He went off the beaten path, that kind of character. And like you've pointed out before, even though he does talk with the assassins at some point in the game, which them alone are very different assassins than we've seen before. But he never, at least from what I remember, he never really becomes... I think he doesn't become like a... I keep thinking of because the Templar is a Grand Master, right? And then an assassin is a...
I think they're headmasters.
No, it's something different. But anyways,
I should know this.
It does become known that he becomes like an official in the Assassin's Guild,
but it's not till after the events of the game.
Yeah, because it's in that like post-credit scene when Haytham's running around and they're at the theater.
Yeah,
that's when he's like, maybe the assassins are the Grand Masters, and I'm thinking of something else for a Templar. But there's there's kind of like an equivalent at that point. There's like a head version of an assassin who leads like a particular guild or region, and then there's the same thing for Templars.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just don't have a lot to say about Black Flag. I did play it a lot when it was out because it was the new Assassin's Creed to play.
That one had a cool campaign expansion too.
It did.
Got to play as Adewale.
I think that's like a completely slept on Assassin's Creed story.
It's like its own game.
Freedom Cry is great. It starts off like super intense. The story's great. It's short, but it's a decent size. Like I would almost compare it to like, it's not as big as Rogue, but campaign wise, it's like almost a full game.
But it did have a lot of what I wish, like it had all the things that I actually liked about Black Flag, and it dimmed down on the naval combat. Like it was there, but it wasn't as much. They really focused on this one island.
Yeah.
He did like all of his assassin stuff there.
There was a lot of stealth.
In
Freedom Cry.
A lot.
I would say a pretty extensive amount. At least, well, I shouldn't say it like that. The option of stealth was, I would say, much more expansive in Freedom Cry. And I felt a lot of that kind of carry over a little bit to Rogue.
Mm-hmm.
Because Rogue, they gave you like bigger fortresses to kind of stealth around in and stuff like that.
Right.
The only thing is that Rogue was really easy to get good at. Especially like if you had just played Black Flag or Freedom Cry, it plays identical. So you could get really good at it really quick. The only difference is I would say the Eagle Vision was a little better. Like it was crisper, the colors were a little different. And then I think the coolest thing that we've obviously never seen in a different Assassin's Creed was there's like the Assassin Hunter thing. Where every time you went into Eagle Vision, if there was an assassin near you, its explanation is that it was another person who could use Eagle Vision.
Mm.
But in layman's terms, if an assassin was near you, you'd start hearing whispers, and you go into Eagle Vision, and you could hunt them down.
Yeah.
And that was really fun. It's things like that I really liked about Rogue. I liked that the Morgan was like a much more battle-ready version of the same ships you had played with before.
Mm-hmm.
It had an ice ram in the front, so right off the gate, you could like bash into people. It had like different cannons on the side. Instead of like dropping barrels that you had to go shoot like in Black Flag, it dropped a trail of fire behind you. So like the Morgan was just more entertaining. Like I agree, like the naval combat got a little bit long, especially in the beginning of Rogue. There's a lot of naval stuff before it really brings you into the game.
Right, which really pushed me away.
But personally. At least it was, like for me at least, the Morgan was more entertaining to play with than the... what was the ship called?
I don't know.
Black Flag. It was after a bird. The Jackdaw.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, but that took a pretty quick turn because the same day Rogue came out, Assassin's Creed Unity came out.
And they had a really cool way to connect the games.
Yeah.
Because the ending of Rogue is the beginning of Unity.
Yeah.
Which
was weird for the two of us because we, at the time, it was the transition between Xbox 360 and Xbox One.
Yeah.
So I think that's another. I don't know how much of it was on purpose, but I think it was great because they released a game that was on Xbox 360 and they released one game that was on Xbox One, which in given time there ended up being ports for the other. So like at some point you could play Unity on 360 and Rogue on Xbox One. But that wasn't long before like they stopped making Xbox 360s, which was so heartbreaking when that happened.
It was so weird because that was our first time experiencing something like that.
Yeah.
Because like obviously for people with older generation like consoles, they had to experience like the original Xbox transitioning to 360.
Right.
We didn't, but it was so strange to think about this console that we had for so long.
Yeah.
It was because we thought it was like, what do you do different from that? Like, it was that and nothing else. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, oh yeah, we're making a new one and it's bigger and better. Like,
and it comes with a Kinect. And
we're like, how is that even possible?
Right. And so, but what was also unique for us at the time is not only did we have both consoles, but so you played Assassin's Creed Unity first, and I played Rogue first.
And then we switched.
When we both finished the games, we switched, and I played Unity all the way through. You played Rogue, and we kind of had this moment like coming together like, dude, these things are connected.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just really odd because because I remember telling you, I was like, the ending to Rogue was really weird. And I vaguely, I didn't go into it, but I vaguely described it, and you were like, "What?" And then you went into Rogue, and kind of we were having this moment at the same time when like I went into Unity, and I was like, "I just saw this."
Yeah, and I kind of just saw the whole journey lead up into what caused the beginning of Unity. So very strange, and
Yeah.
I'm surprised they haven't tried doing anything like that since.
Well, I think
Oh, they kind of did.
they
in a
kind
way.
of did, but I think, and I think I know who you're referring to, but I think the problem is that the whole RPG aspect that the new era of Assassin's Creed falls into makes the games too ambitious
Yeah.
and too big to focus on. See, that's the thing. Like, they've pulled so far away from narrative in some regards that we lose the charm that Assassin's Creed used to have.
Right. And to kind of cover the era of the very unique and strange era that Unity and Syndicate fell under.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like all the other games, like there's the Ezio trilogy, there was the Colonial trilogy, and then after Unity and Syndicate there was the RPG trilogy thing.
Mm-hmm.
But Unity and Syndicate fell under this weird like a 2-time thing.
Right.
Where they had a very specific idea of what they were doing with Assassin's Creed. And I digged it.
It was Assassin's Creed still, but it was like an evolved version of the gameplay we had.
Right, it had everything that we loved about the older games, but it was doing something new but the right way. And
right.
In my older years, I've replayed both Unity and Syndicate, and it was weird that Syndicate did have a weird setback. Like the gameplay wasn't as smooth as Unity. It didn't feel quite the same, but there was a lot of the same stuff. But there were still things that I enjoyed about Syndicate that were still like, this still feels like an Assassin's Creed game.
Yeah.
And I did have my hopes up for them just taking those materials from Unity and Syndicate and making more Assassin's Creed games.
Right.
Because I thought that was the right way to go. But then Origins came out. And Origins wasn't an RPG. But it was a bigger sandbox type Assassin's Creed game. But, and despite what, and again, I seem to always have different opinions than everyone else. But Origins still kind of felt like an Assassin's Creed game. It had a lot of differences. It was an era that took place way before the first game, and
I would agree with you to a degree. It's hard to say because of the setting.
Right.
You know, you come from all these different games where like they throw you in like these really full and rich, like populated cities and so on and so forth. And then you get to Egypt and it's a desert.
Sure, it was more open and there was a lot more traveling involved, which kind of brings me back to some of the things I wasn't a huge fan of, like Black Flag and Rogue and what have you. But storytelling,
it was a great
gameplay, like the characters, it all felt like the same ingredients that you needed for a good Assassin's Creed game.
Mm-hmm.
And me personally, I love those origin type stuff. Like I liked Arkham Origins. I like all the stuff that shows you how stories came to be.
Right.
And I loved Bayek. And I liked how it built you up to this, like, Bayek's not the creator of the Assassin's Creed, but he is what influenced what they were supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like his wife, she had 2 different names and I always forget both of them.
Yeah, because her real name was like Aya, I think,
Yeah.
or something like that. It was a short name, but she essentially became the assassin that in Assassin's Creed 2.
There's a statue.
You see all the different statues, and there's the one with like the serpent around her arms, and like she's the one that's like they accentuate the hidden blade.
Yeah.
Because she's the one who did technically start the hidden ones, and she.
But like she modeled everything that they do off of Bayek,
yeah,
which is kind of a cool
right
thing, and it showed how like they got the symbol.
Mm-hmm.
It just worked really well, and like I brought up before, the expansion that they had of like the hidden ones,
right,
felt very Assassin's Creed like. It just had all those right things,
mm-hmm.
and there was a little less traveling too because the map was a little smaller. And bigger areas to climb and traverse and what have you. But unfortunately, it's the 2 games that came after that, which I know we have different opinions on, but ugh.
So yeah, they really jumped headfirst into the whole RPG aspect of Assassin's Creed with Odyssey.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I had a good experience with Odyssey. But looking back, you remember how long it took me to 100% Assassin's Creed
Like
Odyssey?
3 years.
Because it came out, I want to say it came out, when did Assassin's Creed Odyssey come out? 2017?
Something like that.
Or did I finish it in 2017?
Let's look this up.
I'm remembering the date 2017. But yeah, with the expansions, with all of the bloated, God, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I'm surprised even was finished. It was such a big game. There was way too much to do.
Released in 2018.
2018?
Yeah.
Odyssey?
Yeah. What?
Okay, so if that's the case, 2018, I swore it came out like 2017. But so if it came out in 2018, yeah, that actually does sound right.
And then Valhalla came out 2020.
Yeah, that sounds right because I finally finished Odyssey after Valhalla had come out.
Yeah, but you still waited to play the game.
Yeah, because
you finished
I pre-ordered. GameStop had a special edition steelbook.
Oh yeah,
version of Valhalla that I pre-ordered that I have. And yeah, I just remember it was sitting on my nightstand just waiting, and I was like, I really want to just finish Odyssey. Like, I'm so far.
Yeah.
And I finally finished it after all that time. It took way too long to beat that game or just to finish everything there was to finish in that game. Gosh, Origin started this trend that they really went off the deep end with Odyssey about like the Order of the Ancients.
Yeah.
And I think
they're still doing that.
Right. Origins, before Shadows came out, Origins should have been the only game that did it.
Yeah.
Because again, I think that's why they kept going with it, is because it worked really well in Origins. But gosh, the amount of people you had to hunt down in Odyssey was crazy.
Not only that, but despite the fact that there was tons of people on your hit list, each one took an entire campaign's worth of time to get to.
Yeah.
It took forever. Each one felt like a whole new game's worth of stuff to do.
Yeah.
And it just took way too long.
And another thing that kind of became super apparent with Odyssey. So, rewinding a little bit, Assassin's Creed had a trilogy that came out in between Syndicate and Origins.
Oh, yeah.
The Chronicles trilogy.
Right.
Which were a great trilogy. I loved those
better
games.
Assassin's Creed games than the RPG trilogy.
I loved Chronicles China.
I actually was trying to tell someone that last night of recording this. I was trying to tell him because he never played those games, and I was like, honestly, highly recommend.
Yeah, like if you're a diehard Assassin's Creed fan, like Chronicles are completely slept on.
Yeah.
I'd say in rank of like which one I like most to least, Russia, in my opinion, was the best one.
Oh, hands down.
I loved the way that they rewrote history in that one about like how Anastasia like was alive, but she had like the essence of oh my god.
Oh, what's her name?
The girl from Chronicles China.
Yeah.
And then Chronicles China was my second favorite.
Yeah.
I loved it. I'd say stealth-wise,
yeah,
it did the best. The reason I liked Russia the most is because the game was like so fast-paced and there was so like it changed. Like it was stealth and then it was action and it was like chase sequences and runaway trains and so many great things. It was a blast.
It was so cool.
And then the art style, like it being red and white with like the comic booky look.
Yeah.
Was really cool because like, and then Chronicles China was kind of like that Chinese painterly look.
Right.
That also did the white and red. And then India wasn't bad.
I really liked India.
I wouldn't say it's bad. I'm just saying, like, if I had a choice to go back and replay it, India wouldn't be my first choice. But it was a great game.
Yeah.
I loved it. But the reason I brought up the Chronicles series is because, and there's been a couple offshoots here and there. Like, there was the PSP games. Like, there was a PSP for the first Assassin's Creed called Assassin's Creed Bloodlines.
Yeah.
Which was just another offshoot story for Altair. There was Liberty that came out with Assassin's Creed 3 and that ended up becoming like an actual like
they turned it into a console game later on.
Yeah.
Ezio had a lot of mobile spin-off games.
Yeah, and I think there might have been a DS version of Revelations.
I think so.
Yeah. But the reason I brought up Chronicles is because, gosh, I wish I knew her name. But actually, we're going to take a quick pause so I can look it up. Okay, and I looked it up. Her name is Xiao Jun.
Yeah.
Xiao Jun was a concept that Ubisoft completely blew off. She should have had like her own full game.
Yeah.
And
especially with her origin story.
Like, yeah, and her being involved with like her having like a rooted story with Ezio.
Yeah.
Right. And Ubisoft and people like from Ubisoft had opened up about it too, that for the longest time Ubisoft was afraid to release an Assassin's Creed game. There's a little bit in Syndicate too, because the twins, Evie Fry, but they were so afraid to release a game that just had a female protagonist.
I mean, they still are.
Right. I think they're getting. When we get to Shadows, I'll kind of get back into this.
Yeah,
but it was really apparent with Odyssey, because they're like, oh, you can choose the guy version or you can choose the girl version, and whichever one you didn't choose became like your evil lost
twin, or not twin,
but like younger sibling or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is cool in concept. like not a lot of games did stuff like that, and it was kind of, for an RPG game, that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Like whatever character you don't choose, they still use. You know, they're not just like brushed away. And but it was clear that the game was designed for Cassandra.
Yeah.
The actress, or like she had like a more powerful performance. There was like a whole story arc with like the expansion, like after the game, or like the first expansion where like she has a kid. And and depending on if you're Alexios or Cassandra, it's a different spouse. But you have a kid.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And in Alexios, the guy who played Alexios actually did a good job. I think he had like a really strong performance, because there was even some of the cutscenes where he had to play more emotional that he did a really good job. But there were just points of the game where I was like, when maybe I'd even see like gameplay of someone play with Cassandra, and I'm like, it looks better with Cassandra, or it feels like it was designed for Cassandra in that moment.
Yeah, and they kind of like whenever they advertise Assassin's Creed as a whole and they bring in Odyssey, it's always Cassandra.
It is always Cassandra, yeah.
Yeah. Like she's the canon version.
Right. And then Valhalla came around. And at first, I wanted to be so excited for Valhalla.
Yeah.
Because that's what... After the Japanese setting, the Viking setting is another setting that fans have been asking for forever.
Yeah.
When we saw the cinematic trailer for... Actually, not even the cinematic trailer. I don't know if you remember. When we first saw Eivor was right after... not right after. A couple years after Odyssey had released. There was I forgot what we were watching, but we were watching something that IGN had posted, and there was a guy who's like worked at Ubisoft. He's like, "Oh, let me show you this poster I've been doing." And he pulls up a picture of Eivor, like that picture of Eivor with like holding up like the hidden blade in the center, and on one side it's like snowy tundra with like Viking ships and stuff, and then on his other side there was like England and whatnot. And I remember like telling you like, look, it's Assassin's Creed, and it's like it's a Viking,
right? And
his hidden blade was different, and it was just crazy. And then this cinematic trailer came out, and we were like, whoa,
yeah.
And
that's another thing, Odyssey didn't have a cinematic trailer. It was the first game out of a whole franchise of being known for its bad-ass cinematic trailers.
Yeah.
Not one game missed one.
Right.
All the way up until... Actually, I don't think Liberty had... But, okay, sorry, but we'll push that one to the side. But still, like, out of main game...
Yeah, like flagship releases.
Right.
Yeah.
Odyssey did not have one.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so they even bring it back with Valhalla.
Right.
And you know what? I got my hopes up. I really thought that we were getting back into like what we loved about Assassin's Creed.
Especially when we saw Odin and we thought that that was like more Assassin's Guild related.
Yeah.
Like it was a guy in a hood, and they were also doing something a little different with like, instead of it being an eagle, it was a raven.
Yeah.
That was so cool. And same thing. I was like, this is it.
And they like really emphasize like the whole scene with him and the hidden blade, and he pulls it out.
Right.
And it was like, oh, this is his unique hidden blade. And
but they were like making the hidden blade like a big deal again.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's so much that I don't like about Odyssey. And one of the things is like they added the fact that you have like superpowers, you're a demigod, and you don't have any... There's nothing about the game that has anything to do with Assassin's Creed.
Right.
Not one thing. It shouldn't have even been an Assassin's Creed game. It should have just been something else.
Yeah.
But, so like they bring in the hidden blade again, and they do all this stuff, and it's like, wow, they're back. It's Assassin's Creed.
Right.
But no.
And we did get a little bit of that in the expansions to Odyssey, because in the expansions they did the whole thing with like um they did the whole thing with like the guy who was kind of like the original assassin in Odyssey. That was another thing too, because Bayek had this whole precedent of like precedent of like him being like what the original assassin was.
Right.
But then they kind of contradicted it in Odyssey when they introduced this character. I'm not even going to pretend to remember what his name was, but he was like in Assassin's Creed history, he was the literal first assassin.
Yeah.
And it was because he worked for the Persian ruler, and he had assassinated him with a hidden blade that mounted on the outer side of his gauntlet, like in Valhalla. And they made it to where he was the ancestor of Aya. I'm gonna just call her Aya because I'm not gonna look up her name.
I thought Cassandra was.
Well, technically, wait, am I? Yeah, okay, sorry, Cassandra. Cassandra was.
Yeah. But that guy still, he like
yeah,
had the
yeah,
blade,
yeah.
He had the hood, he did all the
right, and I actually really liked that expansion. My issue with the expansions is like what you're talking about with like they became too rap. I think there could have been a more tasteful way they could have done mythology. Like their whole excuse was that with Origins and Odyssey is like they were in a part of like untold, like an unrecorded part of history, so we can do whatever the hell we want.
I will say that is one thing I didn't like about Origins, is because one of the expansions was by it going into both versions of the afterlife.
Yeah.
And that I did not enjoy.
And they did the same thing with Odyssey.
Yeah.
In Odyssey, there was the expansion or multiple expansions where you went to Atlantis, and then you went to the underworld, and then you ended up going to what's essentially their version of heaven, like the land of the gods. And you find out that in Odyssey that what we know as like the Greek gods were just Isu.
Yeah.
That had still survived.
And that's something else that really irritates me, is because since we've been introduced to Assassin's Creed, and like if you're playing it in chronological order, you're under the impression that the Isu are just this advanced race of humans before humans.
Yeah.
And they were technologically advanced and all this stuff, and then they fell, and that was it. But now they're contradicting it with making it to where like, oh, well, when we came, there were Isu left, and they were quote-unquote gods.
Yeah, like they were so far advanced from like a typical person that they could be considered gods.
But then they do that stupid bullshit that, okay, well, in the world of like God of War, for example, they have a really good explanation for how all that stuff works.
Yeah.
But, Assassin's Creed was kind of just, they're now just doing this bandwagon thing where they want to put in as much as possible and try to make it work and make sense. So they somehow have Greek quote-unquote gods and afterlives, and Norse quote-unquote gods and afterlives, and them somehow work in tangent with each other, but they're all Isu. And
yeah. And another thing about those expansions, more specifically Odyssey, but it had a similar issue with Valhalla, is because they were like RPG games, is the expansions weren't like the previous expansions, like in Unity or Syndicate. Syndicate, that expansion, by the way, we totally skipped over it.
That was sick.
The altered version of Jack the Ripper, and he was like a rogue assassin who had like gone mad.
Yeah, instead of playing as Jacob and Evie, you're playing as Jack the Ripper, which is the son of Jacob.
No.
Yeah. Because he always called Evie Aunt Evie.
Yeah, he called her Aunt Evie because he was Jacob's apprentice. Jacob had like found him on the street.
Oh yeah, and he had like a Dexter thing where he wasn't like most children, and he grew up like strange. That's true, but you also play it as Evie as well, like an older version.
But it was like a cool detective story.
Yeah. Oh man.
But unlike those were like, yeah, they gave you like big maps or segments of the maps that like looked a little different or whatever. In like some side missions, the Odyssey, all those expansions were like gigantic, and they were way too bloated. They gave you way too much stuff to do.
They're games on their own
that you ended up just playing like the main stories with great difficulty because like they were like all level capped.
Yeah,
which is another annoying part of the RPG aspect of Assassin's Creed that they kind of started implementing since Unity, when people could be like leveled up a little higher than you.
Yeah, but there's still alternatives to like make it to where it's like you could still do this like a traditional Assassin's Creed
like
game.
You weren't really restricted. But yeah, and then Valhalla had very similar issues. It wasn't nearly as big as Odyssey. Mm-hmm. It was still a pretty big game.
Right.
But it wasn't nearly as big. It was a very bloated map. I'd argue still way too much to do. The whole, like how often you had to like go off and like conquer different parts of the land and stuff took you so far away from the main story, aside from the fact that there was like 3 main campaigns, that you totally got lost track in what you were doing or who each characters like were. Because there were points when you would meet a character in the beginning of the game and you wouldn't see them until weeks and weeks of playing.
Yeah.
Like later, and Eivor will remember the character and you're like, who is this person?
Not only something that really frustrated me about Assassin's Creed Valhalla was that when the game ended, so I remember very specifically how this went for me. I was in Kuwait when I like binge played Valhalla. Mm-hmm. But I got to the end of the game. Well, actually, that's still hard to say. You get to what Google says is the end of the game, but you're not actually sure if you beat the game.
Yeah.
Like, if you're just playing and you don't look it up on Google or anything, it's not clear at all. It gets to this point where you're like, oh, that could definitely be the end of the game.
Right.
But then there's this cutscene that doesn't necessarily indicate whether or not there's more to do. Like, obviously, it's an RPG. There's way more to do.
Yeah.
But, like, in a lot of games, they have it to where it rolls the credits and then it gives you something.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's, like, Spider-Man or, like, any Insomniac game, they have this big title that goes, whoosh, like, you've beat this game.
Yeah.
But don't worry, there's still plenty to do.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything like that. So I'm sitting there wondering, like, okay, I think I beat the game, but what am I supposed to do now? Because I couldn't give a rat's ass about any side quest.
Yeah.
They were all boring. They were all stale, very repetitive. The only thing I thought about doing was just fixing up my little village because it said that was the only way to progress into what is actually the end of the campaign.
Right.
And I never got to it. It said that after you get your thing to this level, this thing initiates, and then you actually finish the campaign.
Yeah.
Never got to it. I got so bored and irritated with the game. I never, like, quote-unquote finished Valhalla.
Yeah. And 2 points I want to make really quick. One of them is, like, kind of back retracing what I was talking about before, and one of them is, like, a super nitpicky thing. I'll do the nitpicky thing first. Another thing that, and it's something that it's nothing new. It's something that a lot of RPGs have done before. But when you're someone who's super, or trying to be super invested in the narrative and the story, like Assassin's Creed, as someone who typically buys Assassin's Creed and gets all of the expansions and stuff, I would like download them ahead of time. But when you have these expansions that go to other places and whatnot, and are typically designed to be played after you beat the main game, whatever that main game is, especially in Valhalla. The thing is if you pre-download it no matter where you are in the game, it'll try to introduce you to that part.
Yeah.
Like it's accessible. But and you would even be able to go and explore it, and then you'd end up talking to characters that you haven't even met yet, and like doing things that like I don't know. It's just really weird. Like I really kind of we'll kind of get to it in a little bit, but I'm really yearning for the more linear version of Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
At least narrative wise. I mean, I'm okay with like a world to explore to some degree, but like when it comes to the story that really needs to be focused on again with Assassin's Creed, I want it to be like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3.
Right. But like kind of going off of that, and I said it before, but when it comes to a specific franchise, and I've played the previous games because of what the franchise is based on, and then they try adding new stuff later on.
Yeah.
Like I've been so invested in Assassin's Creed because of the things they did the same.
Yeah.
And sure, change can be good every now and then, but it depends on how it's done. Mm-hmm. Like when they went from Assassin's Creed Revelations to 3, they made changes, but it was still Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
When they went from the Colonial to Unity, it was another evolution in Assassin's Creed, but it was still the same thing.
Yeah.
And then they did another like change in Assassin's Creed between Syndicate and Origins, and that was a much bigger change because they were trying to sprinkle in this idea of what they were going to be doing later on down the line.
Yeah.
And it just something like, as much as I love Origins, there's something about it that's like, okay, there is still something missing though.
Yeah.
And it's personally, I like the cluttered, filled cities with a bunch of buildings to climb and people roaming the streets. No matter what era it's in, because you got it in the Ezio games with all the cities in Italy.
Yeah.
And you get it in Assassin's Creed 3 in all of the American cities that weren't as big, but they were still big enough and still cluttered and whatnot. Obviously, Unity was huge and it was filled to the brim with people.
Yeah.
Which was awesome because it felt very real. Same thing with Syndicate. But then Origins, it's empty.
Right.
It's like a few people here and there, almost nothing to climb aside from like the environment.
Yeah.
But yeah, like all that's kind of like taken away like more and more throughout the games, and like Odyssey didn't make things any better. It was essentially the same thing but bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Like way too big. Same thing with Valhalla. Just there's too much space and too much to do. It's overwhelming.
Right.
Especially when you're an adult and you only have like a limited amount of time.
So before we get to the next game, I kind of want to backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
And quickly make our way back to where we were. About the modern aspect of Assassin's Creed.
Okay.
So, it's safe to say that like diehard Assassin's Creed fans, like, you know, like Desmond's run was awesome. Mm-hmm. It was like a super interesting story. It was a guy who like learning that his family is a part of this long ancient guild, and he's like the chosen one to he's not like the chosen one, but he's like the unsaid answer to what the Assassin's Creed needed.
Yeah.
And and it just seemed like so, I don't know, it seemed so grand and it seemed so important. And Desmond going up against Juno,
Right.
and being the one to save the world and from like solar flares and stuff like that.
Right.
Which, there's even some people who question it in the lore of Assassin's Creed, and there's some fans who question it if it was real or not.
Yeah.
If he gave his life for anything.
Yeah.
If like those solar flares were even going to do anything or whatnot. And then when he died, they tried to do this. They tried to do this thing with Black Flag and Rogue, which again I get, and on paper it's a really interesting idea where you play as an Abstergo. In this version, it's Helix because it's like the company. It's like the entertainment company that Abstergo made.
Yeah, it's like a commercial brand for Abstergo.
Right, and like you're playing as one of those employees, kind of like as yourself. Like the whole point is like you are an Abstergo employee who has like the new commercial version of an Animus that's able to access memories of anyone.
Right.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because if you play it right, if you play it as Ubisoft intended, you're supposed to leave the Animus. You're supposed to go roam around. You're supposed to upgrade your security clearance. And you're supposed to hack into computers and learn more about the lore and learn more about Abstergo and what's going on. And there's a lot to learn. You end up learning about like what happened to Desmond after he died and how they extracted his body and what they did with his body, which kind of comes into play later. But if you're not playing it right or if you don't get that, then it's boring. It's boring. You walking around an office space from one point to another, maybe seeing a conversation or having a conversation with an Abstergo employee that you don't give two flying fucks about. And with the exception in Black Flag, they try to do a thing where like the Sage, remember when they were trying to do the Sage for a couple games?
Yeah.
Where like the modern day Sage was like working at Helix with you.
Yeah.
Because then they tried to do a Sage in Unity, which definitely wasn't the highlight of Unity and wasn't nearly as interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But and then I think again they tried something totally different with Unity, where you didn't really play as anyone.
They kind of did the same thing to where you as a gamer, because now they've branched off, like Helix has branched off and they've started making it to where people can access these memories as like consumers, like actually like people playing a video game that is based in history, and then you have the rebels who will speak to you as a gamer like, hey, you're being lied to.
Yeah, and it's like it's up to you and me to,
as a gamer and a hacker.
Yeah, and which was like okay. The sequences with Arno were kind of interesting when like you'd go back to different historical points in France. Which was really cool, like climbing the Eiffel Tower and like planes flying by you, or like developing the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah,
that was all really cool. Again, on paper, but it's like there's no substance for like what's going on in the modern world, or like not having a character to tie yourself to.
Right.
It's boring.
Yeah.
And then Syndicate really just threw that out the window, where like that same character, like you weren't even a character anymore. You were just watching through like the perspective of different cameras,
like found footage stuff
of what happened to Sean and Rebecca when they tried to infiltrate Abstergo, and that was ridiculously boring.
Yeah.
The only thing that was remotely cool is that when you beat the game, you see that they're Abstergo's working on trying to bring Juno back to life.
Right.
Which was really cool. I was like, fuck it! Like, as a diehard Assassin's Creed fan, like, you're like, no, it's her.
Yeah.
Like, fuck that bitch.
And they also did a time thing, too, in Syndicate where Juno opens up this rift to where you could play as the granddaughter of Evie.
Right.
During, like, World War II.
Yeah.
In London. And
that was sick.
That was pretty cool. And it was probably a closer idea of what a World War... Was it World War II or was it World War I? But, like, it kind of gave you an idea of what it would be like to play an Assassin's Creed game within that era.
It was II because they mentioned something about Winston Churchill.
Oh, yeah. So, but it was... That was pretty cool.
Yeah. But again, like... With that exception, there was no progression and there was nothing really going on in the modern day setting.
Yeah.
And I think what they were trying to do, and again, they crashed and burned. I think what they were going to do is they were going to make it to where Watch Dogs eventually became the modern day Assassin's Creed.
They were so close.
But they ruined it with Legion, and they tried to throw in a lot of the same. They did the same thing. We could probably have a whole different conversation about Watch Dogs.
Yeah.
But long story short, they did the exact same thing with Watch Dogs, where they thought that the RPG freedom to create and play your way was the way to go. So they stripped the story. They stripped a main character to where you could just play as literally anyone in the city.
Yeah, and something else that really irritates me about that is, one, the way that was advertised was super exaggerated because technically you couldn't play as anyone. Believe me, I tried. But what was so cool, and that's something I was going to bring up, is depending on how in-depth you want to do it, if you wanted to play the whole franchise in order, it was Black Flag, Watch Dogs, and then Rogue. But
like you could play the different Watch Dogs in between different Assassin's Creed and get a specific type of experience.
Right, but like what they should have done with Watch Dogs, just real quick, is the first Watch Dogs is like, it kind of just sets the premise of what it is. Mm-hmm. And it had a cool character, cool story, whatever. I loved Watch Dogs. Watch Dogs 2 was like, okay, it's a little pulling back from what we're aiming towards as far as a character and story, but this is what the gameplay is going to be like. And then the third game is where it all ties in with Assassin's Creed stuff, but then you have all the gameplay aspects from 2.
Yeah.
Which I think is what they should have done. But
I think
it was boring.
But like they even had the expansion in Watch Dogs Legion where you could play as an actual assassin.
I never got that far.
But regardless, it's like it's something that they fell short in. They didn't understand like what made the previous games so good.
Yeah.
And when they tried to innovate, they ended up just ruining it.
Yeah.
And that was the same thing with like the modern day with Assassin's Creed. They didn't understand what made Desmond's story so important to the game. So when they tried to change it, they missed all of the important aspects of it.
Yeah.
So I think what ended up coming across Ubisoft was like, oh, we need a character, which again would be a step in the right direction if they gave us an interesting character.
Yeah.
Because they ended up giving us Leia, I want to say her name was.
Yeah.
I don't know. I keep reusing similar names. Leia. I think her name actually was Leia. But they gave us her, which at first was like kind of a shock because like you could play as her, you could run around. She similar to Desmond, like as you would play as Bayek, you would learn new skills.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. And like she was having similar issues with like the bleeding effect and whatnot. The only difference is that she wasn't a descendant of Bayek or anyone. She started off as like an Abstergo agent.
Yeah.
Which again was an interesting twist.
But then she started to get manipulated, or not manipulated, but convinced by an outer source who turned out to be Desmond's father.
Right. And then going after that, and I'm not sure what was going on or why. But with Assassin's Creed Odyssey, they did this thing with, I'm just going to call her Leia. With Leia, where she ends up meeting whichever character, let's say Cassandra. You're playing as Cassandra. She meets Cassandra.
Yeah.
Because throughout the Odyssey story, you find out that your real dad was not Leonidas. He was this, I forgot what his name was, but he was immortal.
Yeah.
He was this guy who held the staff of Hermes or something like that, and he was immortal. And he was the one that was kind of like guiding humanity. Like, he was like a secret Jesus before Jesus. And he ended up passing the staff to Cassandra, and Cassandra passes it to Leia.
Yeah.
So Leia was what? Like you were going to make her immortal for some reason? But and then that got changed on its head when you played Valhalla, and she goes into that same weird sanctuary or cave where Ivor and Basim went into, and they allegedly got stuck in there forever, and she ends up tapping into the digital realm that Desmond's conscious got stuck into, because you meet Desmond at the end of Valhalla.
But he's not Desmond. He doesn't.
He's called like the Oracle or something like that.
Yeah, he's essentially like the living entity inside of,
like, it's like a digital afterlife.
Right. And it's where she meets her demise, but in her, like, her mistake of, like, falling into the trap and dying brings Basim back to life, because his body comes in contact with the staff.
Yeah.
Which brings him back to life. Mm-hmm. Which is weird.
See, and that's another thing. Like, I don't know if it's something that they're going to come back to, but what's the significance or what's the point of having Basim from the Age of Vikings being an immortal?
Right.
Let alone in the modern day. So that kind of brings me to the next game in conversation, Assassin's Creed Mirage.
Right.
Which we have, like we said in the beginning of the episode, we did talk pretty extensively about. But couple pinpoints or like things of note are that, one, the whole point of Mirage was like going back to basics, trying to get back to the root of Assassin's Creed.
Right.
Focus on stealth, smaller like map.
There was still a lot they did right with
Mirage.
Mirage.
It was definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But there were some things. It was almost like ghosts of Valhalla and Odyssey kind of fell into Mirage.
For me, it was too many small things that like added up and made me like, it started to like downgrade my opinion of Mirage. Mm-hmm. Like, first off, it was the fact that it's not an RPG. It's not like this big sandbox thing. Mm-hmm. But it still felt like one. They acted like RPG NPCs. They
like no
they
real
moved like it. There were no real cutscenes.
or the ones that there were very few and far between.
Right, and Basim felt like a completely different character than the one that we were introduced to in the previous game, which was Valhalla.
Played by a new actor.
Yeah.
Looks different.
Literally looks like a completely different character.
Acts like a completely different character.
And they came out with a very odd origin of why he becomes evil. It's very strange, and it kind of just makes it seem like a weird child who was manipulated, and even after he was given the truth about what was going on with him, he still went along with it for reasons unknown. But the gameplay itself was still fun, very smooth. It felt like a traditional Assassin's Creed gameplay, which was nice. Something else that really took me away from it, though, was something I did not like about something I didn't like about Odyssey, and was that there was things about it that like took away from the fact that you're not an assassin in Odyssey, but like the fact that they had superpowers and all these things that made them inhuman. That was the one thing that took me away from Mirage, was the fact that they implemented this skill that you unlock that takes away from the stealth challenge of the whole thing, which was the weird... What do they call it?
I forgot.
It was like a weird thing to where everything slows down, you select a bunch of targets, and he automatically takes them out, no matter how close or far or whatever. Yeah. I even used it, and it was kind of a cheat, but there was one mission where I didn't know how to get into the fortress, and the only way to get in was to use that weird blink ability to teleport to the top.
That happened to me too.
And it took away from what I love about Assassin's Creed, like figuring out how to get in, the cool sequence of climbing, and the satisfying stealth mechanics. Right. When you can just like block a couple hits, unlock some more chi power. It wasn't cheap, but I don't really know what else to call it. And then just automatically take people out. Right. I will say, I do like the fact that they purposely made combat more difficult so that you were more motivated to do stuff.
So I agree with all of those. But back to kind of what I was saying about like the modern day stuff about Assassin's Creed, which Mirage had like none.
They didn't want to focus on it because they knew how much people were irritated with it.
Right, but similar thing to the modern thing about like they didn't understand why the Desmond arc was like so good, so when they tried to change things, they ruined it. Yeah. With Mirage, the gameplay was like simplified again. A focus on stealth, all of that stuff. Like, sure, they're making a more traditional Assassin's Creed gameplay. But again, they're forgetting what made Assassin's Creed in total. And they only fixated on the gameplay. Yeah. They didn't fixate on the fact that like Assassin's Creed comes from a lineage of like great stories. Yeah. And great characters and great arcs and like specific history is another thing about Assassin's Creed. Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, and Mirage, they were like, oh, you're at this point in history. But there's nothing interesting happening about these points in history. In Valhalla, they were close. They were like, oh, this is a point when the Christians were coming in and killing a bunch of Vikings, and there was a war. There's something there that could have been so emotionally interesting about that, but they totally disregarded.
They did it correctly though in Origins though, because you interacted and worked with people like Cleopatra. You assassinate Caesar, who that was turns out is the creator of what would soon become the Templars.
Right. so
Like when they always say the father of understanding guide us, they're referring to Caesar.
right.
Which
And so that's cool. But that's the thing is like you're forgetting the point is like story, gameplay, and then like history is a big part of Assassin's Creed.
yeah,
Like,
not just being in it, but actually interacting with it.
and some people might be like, oh, but what about Ezio and Altair? Like, what's so specific about them? What a lot of people don't realize is that Altair was in a point where like Christianity ruled the world,
Right.
and Jesus was not that far behind. Like, had not happened that long ago.
Yeah.
And like the real Knights Templar were they were like a powerhouse. Like not only were they a military force, but they were like the ones who controlled the quality of life and stuff. And then Ezio's time, like it was different points in Italian history, and they really wanted to focus on his family, but especially in Brotherhood, which both 2 and Revelations kind of like tie into in a particular way, is like the era of like the Borgias.
Yeah.
And like because they were a family that monopolized like Italy
But see, that's
and then there was like the thing about like the Pope, and there was Leonardo da Vinci and stuff like that.
but that's the thing is the roster of so Assassin's Creed 1 technically did it, but it's like what I was just saying. There's a difference between being in history and interacting with that history.
Right.
Because in Assassin's Creed 1, they didn't do it as well, but you're dealing with this conflict between different religions, cultures, powerhouses, all like colliding with one another, but it's all blended into just one seamless story.
Mm-hmm.
While they did it better in Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations, but starting to introduce specific characters, like you interacting, working with, and bonding with Leonardo da Vinci. And oh my God, there's other people, but Machiavelli, like all these people, and how they not only affected Ezio as a character and what they did for him to make him better, but how Ezio was that hidden part of history that shaped certain things, like how Ezio was the reason why Leonardo da Vinci's glider was never discovered because he destroyed it, and things like that, like actually interacting with history.
And Connor was like a hidden like soldier. He was
the weapon of George Washington.
There was like an actual story, like in actual history, of like a Mohawk Native American
who worked with George Washington,
who was like a soldier.
Yeah,
and he was like a powerhouse. And that's what they turned Connor into. They made it to where his training was assassin's training, and he was like a one-man army who was under the wing of
and like
George Washington.
And just like how in like the Revolutionary War and what have you, when they started like implementing guerrilla warfare,
right?
In this game, they were like Connor's the reason why these were even ideas to consider.
How the Americans like got those ideas and stuff was because Connor kind of like took native traditions and warfare tactics.
And although it kind of eased in and out as far as consistency, they all did it. Every single Assassin's Creed game did it in one way or another, all the way up until Odyssey. Because in Odyssey, there's no one. There's Leonidas for a fraction of the game.
Right.
No one gives a shit about him. And then after
there was a couple characters like you met oh my god. Hephaestus. No, not Hephaestus. Oh my god. Like Pluto.
Right. But that's the thing is like you meet
Plato.
You're right.
Plato.
Pluto's a god.
Yeah, Plato.
But
like you met a bunch of like philosophers.
But that's the difference, though, is you just met them. No way did they affect your story, and no way did you affect theirs.
Right.
And the closest thing you get to it for both Odyssey and Valhalla. Well, for Valhalla, you actually meet like a king that ruled during that time and what have you. But the closest thing you get to those games are fictional characters. They're gods. They're Isus.
Yeah.
When you affect their life and they affect yours, that doesn't count because it's mythology that can be rewritten in however way you see fit.
Mm-hmm.
But and Mirage was kind of lacking that too. Like there were a lot of characters that like affected you and you affected them, but they were all fictional characters.
Yeah, and they were like no part of history, and there's like no significance about where Boston was.
The only significance of Bassam is just what leads up to the events of Valhalla.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, realistically, you could have made Mirage a game about a completely new character and it wouldn't have made any difference in the Assassin's Creed story.
Right. The only thing, like, narrative-wise, aside from the gameplay that I really liked, but again, they fell short on because it's, like, something that on paper was so cool, but they missed the mark on it. And in the trailers, it seemed really exciting, but in execution, when you played the game, it wasn't very exciting, is Bassam was, like, haunted by a djinn all throughout the game. So sometimes when you'd finish, like, a main assassination or a main story arc, you'd, like, get this cutscene of, like, a djinn, like, you know, scaring Bassam, which... Again, on paper, it's like there was so much potential with like doing something a little different with a character like that.
And spoiler alert, but that djinn didn't even turn out to be anything significant because, like I told you when we first saw the original cinematic trailer that came out, we had so many guesses of like what it was.
Right.
I thought it was kind of like so, and I bring up Dexter a lot, but it's weird how many times that this is a great reference. But in the story of Dexter, he refers to his urges as the dark passenger. Like this little voice in his head that tells him like, hey, it's time to kill.
Right.
I thought that when Mirage was first announced, this creature was a visual representation of the corruption and evil that resided in Bassam.
Yeah.
Like something that was going to grow, and there was no explanation. It was more of just like, he's just not a good person, but it's hidden inside of a noble assassin.
Right.
But no, it just turns out that first off, they throw it at you as a djinn, but it's not even a djinn. It's Juno. It's just Juno somehow got her little fingies, her little digital fingies, on Bassam somehow and manipulated him.
Right. How?
And then when he found out who she was and found out that she's this manipulative goddess, he was like, you're such an evil person, but I'm still gonna follow you.
Well, it's because... it's based on what they showed in Valhalla, that Bassam is the reincarnated version of Juno's husband.
Right.
That died.
And then they even made it out to where like they refollowed some of the tropes of Assassin's Creed Rogue, where from Bassam's point of view, now that he has all these like little whispers from Juno, he sees the assassins as these evil, like it's this evil organization, when really it's just miscommunication. Like now he's just seeing it from a different person's point of view, but like it was kind of just proof in both Rogue and Mirage that even the assassins had to do bad things every now and then, but like it's still nothing compared to what Juno plans on doing, or what the Templars wanted to do.
Right.
So it's kind of just silly.
Yeah. And it's just like again, gameplay wise, it's really entertaining and it's fun, but
it just falls short on, again, a lot of things that make Assassin's Creed that they've been missing the mark on for a rather long time now.
Yeah.
And that finally brings us to that period of time right before Mirage had come out. Ubisoft was kind of like announcing this initiative to potentially move Assassin's Creed forward, and it was the Assassin's Creed hub thing.
Yeah.
That you kind of get a hint at in Shadows when we get to it, but they like announced Project Red was a Japanese game.
Right.
I forgot what Mirage was.
No, well, because it was announced around the same time, it was still Mirage.
Okay, yeah.
Like, it was the first game that was actually, like, it had any kind of legs to stand on. So
it was Mirage, and then Project Red. They did Project Jade,
which was the mobile Chinese game.
Which, from the gameplay that they showed, was like a full-fledged Assassin's Creed game.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone played it.
Is it out?
It's been out.
I might have to double check that. But anyways, and then there was also the Project Hex, which I don't know what they said it's supposed. So a lot of people were like, "Oh, it's going to be Assassin's Creed that takes place in like the Salem witch trials." No, it's not. It takes place way before that, because what a lot of people don't know is that yes, in the United States we had our witch trials. But years before, there was like a place in Germany, or what's now like the modern, or like what we consider Germany. They had their own version of like the witch trials. And that's what Hex is allegedly supposed to be based on. And they even said that like Hex is supposed to be, whilst like they said Assassin's Creed Project Red, which is now Shadows, was going to be the next RPG Assassin's Creed game.
Right.
And there would probably be another subsequent game that's similar to Mirage, where it's like more, quote unquote, narrative focused, when I'd say Mirage wasn't that narrative focused.
Yeah.
Hex is going to be a new version of Assassin's Creed, where it's got a new gameplay style, and it's like a blend between some RPG aspects and some narrative stuff, which I'd argue Shadows is doing.
You know, if you ask me, Project Hex should be one of two things.
Okay.
The second thing is going to sound really odd, but just for the sake of Ubisoft trying new things with Assassin's Creed. The first idea, which is the one I really aim for, is I think Hex should be what I was talking about earlier, and them taking everything that we actually liked from Unity and Syndicate and making a newer generation version of one of those games.
Right.
Which I think is the best option, personally. Or, it was a weird idea, but a couple days ago, I was like, oh, well, you know, Assassin's Creed has tried all these weird things. Mm-hmm. What if, and I don't even know how they would do it, but what if there was a game that was an Assassin's Creed game, but played like a Souls-like?
No.
It's a weird idea, but I wonder if that's something they might try with Hex. Because I really don't know what else you can do unless you're going to try some kind of weird first-person Dishonored / thief thing.
The only other thing I don't know. I don't know what else you could do that would be considered different, unless maybe, I don't know. I don't know what you would do different, but, and who's even to say that ends up being the case, you know, that it does end up being something different. But Project Red, which we saw a little teaser of, it was like Assassin's Creed in Japan.
Yeah.
And we've been asking for Assassin's Creed in Japan since
we left Ezio.
Yeah, and there were concepts for a Japanese Assassin's Creed game years ago referred to as Phoenix, right?
Rising Sun.
Rising Sun.
Yeah.
But it had this really cool, very traditional Assassin's Creed-like character who was in like white and red.
He was there was a whole thing on the Ubisoft website for a while of like the breakdown of the game.
Yeah.
That I remember seeing when we were in high school. I was in animation class and I was like not doing what I was supposed to, and I was browsing the internet. But the whole story was you were playing as this guy who was like, he was a Ronin, and he had been banished from his village or whatever, and you know, kind of similar to like that scrappy assassin, old fashioned type of Assassin's Creed character. He ends up like getting into the wrong crowd, but he is introduced to an assassin, and he takes like the morals and the skills of a samurai and translates them into an assassin.
Yeah.
Which was really interesting. But we got a very different version of that in Assassin's Creed Shadows.
Yes.
Where you play as two characters.
Again,
with a caveat that at first I was personally really mad at, but I'm kind of okay with now. So you play as Naue, who is our assassin character, who in the narrative she's a shinobu, which is essentially
Shinobi.
in the game they've said like shinobu like a bunch of times. I don't know if that has like a different type of translation, but shinobu,
Basically a ninja.
basically a ninja, but when you're in like a tribe of shinobi or shinobu or whatever, at least from what I understand in the game, is in a ninja is like an assassin, someone who goes and like hunts down specific people, while like a shinobu or a shinobi is more of like a freelance tribe of thieves and hunters and stuff. But she's kind of translating her abilities as like into an assassin to hunt down a bunch of people. Unless I'm totally wrong and it means the same thing that a ninja means. Are you looking it up?
Yeah. It's literally just shinobi, or more commonly known as ninja. A spy and infiltrator, often employed as a mercenary.
Okay,
who
so
specialized in stealth.
Yeah, so she is a ninja.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna like get into her story because it's brand new, and I encourage anyone to play this game. But she has a really interesting, like, she comes from a very specific background. There's a very this is a what do they refer to it as? Feudal Japan?
Yeah.
And like there's like this weird thing about like the Portuguese. I'm not really knowledgeable about Japanese history, but apparently it's this point where like the Portuguese are like kind of migrating into Japan, and they're trying to like make a living and do business in Japan. And then you also play as Yasuke, who he has a real name that I forgot.
They actually don't say his real name, because when he's introduced, he tells them the name that he was given as a slave.
Right.
And then they give him the name Yasuke as his Japanese name.
Right.
So we still haven't been given his real birth name.
But what's interesting about this character is that this is a character. So instead of it being like you play as, well, like, okay, maybe that's not entirely true. Because similar to Connor, who was like, there was a particular person in history like
Who inspired,
unrecorded
yeah.
history, who they reconfigured into Connor. While Yasuke is like, he was a real person that turned into like a folklore character. He turned into like Japanese folklore, like because of the
Like his skills became legend.
yeah. So they turned him into like a folk hero,
right.
and he was told in stories for generations and generations as like the Black Samurai and stuff like that.
Like he was a real person.
Right. And so we get to play as this almost mythological character to a degree, and which is really interesting. And again, I'm not going to get into history either because, but so like you said, Brandon, like we've only been playing for a certain amount of time. I think from when I saved it, I have like 13 hours in the game.
Okay. I think I only have like 7.
But there are some. This game was like pushed back quite a few times in its development. But I'm glad that it was, because I think quality-wise, it's great. I think it looks amazing. It's the most full and like lush environment of any Assassin's Creed game.
And it's the most lively out of the RPG ones.
Yeah,
like it has life to it. The characters, they do have their moments where they're a little robotic, but they feel like way more interactive and immersive than previous Assassin's Creed RPG games.
There's way more like actual cutscenes in the game.
Yeah.
Especially in the beginning, but there's a lot of like actual cutscenes. And there are quite a bit of like just the in-game kind of cutscenes where it's like more RPG related, but they still feel more lively, and they don't. There's sometimes when there's a little bit of robotic movements to them, but they still feel very real.
Mm-hmm.
They move way more. They don't like recycle the same movements whenever they're having conversations with people, like in Odyssey or like in Mass Effect or something like that.
But just like the quality of the game in general is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was one point when I was at a synchronized spot, which by the way, that's something they fixed out of that Assassin's Creed, in my personal opinion, has done wrong since the very beginning. Assassin's Creed, when it comes to synchronization, you go up to a point and it says press this button, which is usually a button that you need after synchronizing. So there's the chance that you might synchronize a second time.
Right.
But what they should have done was made it to where after you've done it the first time, you can't do it again.
But in this one, it doesn't even give you the option. As soon as you climb onto the point,
right,
it goes into the synchronization, and then anytime after that, it just zooms out.
But as soon as you get up to that point, like let's say you were to drop down and then go back up, it doesn't happen again.
Right.
Which is great.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, it just zooms out.
But there was one point when it was synchronizing, and it didn't show her. Like, it zoomed out far enough to where it was just showing the environment. But I was like, if you just paused it right there, like that still frame of just the environment, that could be a cinematic trailer.
Mm.
It looked so good.
But yeah, it looks amazing.
Yeah.
The weather system that they hyped up is like lives up to its name.
Right.
I love that the like seasons change, and that every season like affects the environment, and it changes like the functionality of the characters and stuff. Like for example, there's a specific castle that I ended up just infiltrating purely just to get to like a synchronization point, like a viewpoint. But I came back to later so that I could actually like take down the guards and like get to the chest that was in the center of the castle.
Yeah.
And when I had first gone there, it was like springtime, and it was like lush, and it was clean air and so on and so forth. And the time I came later was like in the fall, and it was like heavy rain and wind and stuff. And like the NPCs were like bracing their face and they were like having a difficult time seeing through like the rain, or they couldn't hear you coming up to them or stuff like that. And because they were like trying to like make their way through, or like they were wearing bigger hats or something, they can't see you coming sometimes.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that it's awesome. I love how the weather like actually means something. And it also just makes the game feel and look different, like as you play.
Yeah, I also really like. I've brought this up before, but I really like the fact that I can make a mistake and like fight a guy. Like maybe if I didn't like go up and like assassinate him the right way, and it initiates a fight between us, the whole map doesn't just like instantly get alerted.
Yeah.
Like I can actually fight this guy, kill him off real quick, and then still have a chance to like sneak around.
Right.
Like maybe one other guy came by or heard who was just close enough, but it gives me plenty of time to like climb up somewhere, assassinate him, and then move on.
Right.
So that's really nice. But even though it's an RPG, they're still going in the right directions.
I agree.
As far as like what an Assassin's Creed game should be.
Like if they wanted, not that I would encourage it, but if Ubisoft wanted to keep making the RPG-esque Assassin's Creed game, this is the standard, and this is the as far as I would want them to go with like it being a very Assassin's Creed-esque game with like the flavor of RPG to it.
Yeah.
But I also even like going even further that it doesn't even have to be an RPG game, because there's two different settings that completely change the game.
Right.
There's one setting that I think you're playing with where it's guaranteed assassinations.
I actually haven't initiated that yet. I completely forgot to. So I've been struggling.
For the listeners, guaranteed assassination is a setting in the game. So it's been in the past couple games, but essentially like based on the leveling system, there's some enemies that are not only leveled up higher than you, but there's some enemies that, like, depending on their skill or armor, they'll have multiple segments to their life bar.
Right.
And if they have too many segments for your hidden blade to handle, sometimes you can't just do an assassination in one go.
Yeah.
You can do an assassination and it'll take like a chunk of their health away, but you might have to like evade or finish them off with a fight.
Right.
Guaranteed assassination changes that, where it's like as long as you're above them or you're in stealth, the assassination option immediately kills them.
Yeah, because it kind of goes back to a traditional Assassin's Creed game where the function of an assassination
can just take someone out.
Right.
Yeah. And so again, that completely changes the game. So it's like you can play it as intended, where like you have to like really slow down, pay attention to like their life bar, how much armor they're wearing, and figure out how to approach the situation from there. Or you can turn on guaranteed assassination and just focus on not getting detected, and you can just kill off a bunch of people.
Right.
Which, depending on the difficulty, can be just as much of a challenge, but it just plays a little different.
Yeah.
And then the second big setting, and it's the one I'm playing on,
I also have it on,
is there's an option for canon mode.
Yeah.
So instead of you sitting through these in-game cutscenes where you can choose different dialogue options, the game immediately has the canon options selected.
Yeah.
So it becomes one fluid cutscene, and the game plays as intended, which is really interesting. And I'm not going to tell you what it is, because you probably haven't gone to it yet. But there's a mission quite a few hours in where you have to make a choice on like a particular item that you're going to choose.
I did get there.
Oh, but the game has like a canon version of which item she selects.
Which, it's moments like that where I forget that the canon mode is on, and I'm like, oh, I want to select this part.
But she picks one up, right?
Right. Which, in that case, she actually picked up the thing that I wanted.
Same! I was going to pick that too!
But I will say what kind of irritates me is that I'm not going to say what part it is. well, you've definitely played it, but there's one point where they ask her in the cutscene, they're like, what do you want to do, this or this? And my brain's like, I would go this route. And she went the other way. And I'm like, oh, that's a little.
But it is interesting because it shows you like, instead of you playing like how you would play,
right?
You're just like any other of the older Assassin's Creed games. You're going on the journey with this character.
Yeah.
And you're seeing what quote unquote happened in this history.
Yeah.
And I think that's if they continue to do the RPG route going forward, these are settings that I want.
Yeah.
I want to be able to change the functionality of the game like that.
This game is a good template for the RPG Assassin's Creed game. I will say there are still things that I might adjust to make it a little bit more Assassin's Creed like. But there again, for an RPG, like it can't really change much more. So, right. I will say, because like we did bring this up, but like you could play as two different characters. But what I'm confused about is it an option from the very beginning that you could play as the other character?
See, I was going to bring that up too, because I haven't gotten to a point. Like I said, I'm 13 hours into the game.
Yeah.
And not unless I missed it. And I've tried fiddling around with the menu too. I can't figure out how to play as Yasuke.
Personally, I don't want to. Like I've said this a million times off recording, but I'm not playing an Assassin's Creed game to play as
a samurai that's not even in...
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I could say the same thing for Odyssey and Valhalla. I'm not playing to play as a Spartan. I'm not playing to play as a Viking. Well, technically, I wanted to play as an assassin who was technically a Viking.
Yeah.
But they fucked that up. I'm playing to play as an assassin.
Right.
So, like, if I want to play as a samurai, I'll play Ghost of Tsushima. Which even that... Okay, that's a kind of a sensitive topic for some Assassin's Creed fans. But, like, I want to play as her. Like, I want to play as Naue because she's the assassin.
And I like Yasuke as a character.
Yeah, he's cool.
And again, based on what we were talking about before about, like, historical characters, he would have been a great character to, like, have as, like, just someone you interact with all throughout the game.
Right.
And maybe if they wanted to do something similar to, like, the Insomniac Spider-Man game where there was, like, an epic moment somewhere towards, like, the end where, like, maybe Naue gets knocked down or something, and then it, like, shifts over to Yasuke, and, like, as this giant brooding samurai that's stronger than everyone else, like you playing as him mowing everyone down, that would have been sick. And again, that would have given opportunity for, like, Ubisoft to just get their head out of their ass and have Naue as, like, the character of the game.
Yeah.
It's her game. I mean, for the most part, it pretty much is her game anyway. But it's like you might as well have just gone the extra mile, had Yasuke as just a side character, and leave it at that. It wouldn't be a big deal. Like, I wouldn't even mind him being on the covers and all if, like, maybe he was that important to the story. But it's purely just the fact that, like, just have Naue as the playable character.
Yeah, I mean... Yeah, but it still brings me back to the thought of, like... Is there a way we could play as him whenever we want? Or did they advertise the capabilities of playing as both characters?
No, so I think I can't answer for sure, and I've been trying to not look it up because I don't want there to be, like... I don't want to look something up and then it show me something I didn't want to see.
Yeah.
But... I know for a fact at some point, unless I've missed it, that there is some way to, like, choose to play as Yasuke, because I came across this, it's not really like a side mission. It's almost like you know how in a lot of, like, Assassin's Creed games that you'll find, like, tombs or like things to explore.
I found one.
So I found one too, and like a lot of the RPG Assassin's Creed games, it's blocked by like a wall that needs to be blown up.
Yeah.
But the thing is now she can't pick up the explosive barrels. Like in all of the other games, you could like walk up and pick up a container and like put it somewhere.
Yeah.
They're too heavy for her. So she can't even like walk into it. It'll make like a sound, but it doesn't give you the option. So what I'm assuming is you have to go back as Yasuke, pick that up, and open up the wall. Because like we were talking about this the other day when you walked in on me playing. But something I find, you said it was annoying. I think it's really interesting because, again, it makes you think about how to approach situations. But because she's really little, if you knock someone out or if you kill them, she can pick them up and put them on her back, but she walks really slow.
Yeah.
So you have to be really careful about like who's near you or whatever, or like paying attention like people's foot track or like where they're walking.
Yeah.
But I'm sure as Yasuke, for how big he is, you could just throw someone over your shoulder and go.
See, and that's where I've kind of used that as an advantage because whenever it comes to... It's very rare that I actually put the bodies somewhere where they can't be found. Mm-hmm. I usually use them as bait because then someone's going to be like, huh? And then they'll like walk up and be like, there's a dead body here. But then that's where I'm like above and I'm like, yes, I've been waiting for you.
Yeah. And okay, so I do want to talk a little bit about the NPCs and like the enemy AI a little bit. There's a lot of good, I have to say, actually. But there's a little bad. I'll start off with the bad. So first off, some people were saying, I didn't see any evidence of it, but a lot of people were saying that like the AI was just as bad as the AI from Star Wars Outlaws, where like you could have someone detect you and then they would look at you and then they'd forget you're there.
That has never happened with me because they see me and they...
Well, again, like I said, I haven't had that kind of issue yet. The only thing I have seen is there was one guy who was playing the game, and when he would get detected and enemies would start approaching him, he would go prone and they can't hit you when you're prone. And I was like, there's no way that's true. Like, I wonder if that was like a circumstance kind of thing. I played the game. I purposely got like detected and I went prone and they just killed me.
That happened with me too. Like, it's not because I wanted to test it, but there was one time when I went prone on accident and I was trying to see if maybe I could hide in like the bush and like crawl away from them and they could lose me. But they just went up to me and then they just...
Yeah, and they'll kill you.
Yeah.
So again, I think that guy just like had a very specific circumstance or maybe something was buggy about his system and he decided to make a meme out of it. But that didn't happen with me. The only bad thing I've seen so far is that one, I've seen them get stuck a couple times. Like sometimes they'll detect you and they'll kind of get like, they'll like walk up against something and then they'll just stop there and they'll constantly just be in an alert status and it doesn't go away because they haven't been able to inspect the area. But that only happened to me once.
It hasn't happened to me.
And so one quick little thing that is a good thing, and even IGN said it in their review, is that for as big as the game is, there's very few bugs. So
yeah,
I've come across very little issues so far. And the only other issue I have that seems to be a more consistent thing is that for as long as they've introduced a whistle in Assassin's Creed, in most stealth games, whenever you whistle, they'll like be like, huh? And then they'll like walk over to where they heard the whistle, or at least as close as possible. But in this game, I've noticed they'll only respond, they'll hear the whistle, but they'll only inspect it if you're on the ground. if you're like above them, they'll like go, huh? And then immediately look away. I don't know if
I haven't noticed that, because usually when I have used it, I'm on the ground.
Right.
What I personally do is I'll be in a spot and then I'll whistle. They come over to the spot, but as they're coming over, I climb up.
Right, that's what I normally do too, but I thought like there's a couple times that like I thought I could cheat that and I could be like hanging off the side, whistle, and then just like pull myself up, but it doesn't work.
Have you seen the hiding mechanic with hanging? Have you encountered that yet?
I haven't encountered it, but I've seen it.
There was
like,
one time
in the
when
game.
I didn't even know that was a thing, but there was one time when I was just like, I was doing like parkour like during like a stealth sequence, and I jumped and I like grabbed onto something and hung there for a second, and she highlighted how she does when she's in like hidden, and I just hung there and I'm like, they can't see me when I'm like this?
No, it's the shadow system. If
Oh,
you're
that's right.
Yeah, if you're in shadow, but it's not a spoiler or anything because it was in like gameplay before the game came out. Something I don't think I've learned it in the game yet, but something I'm looking forward to is I'm looking forward to being able to like go prone in water and like breathing through a straw.
It's a skill you have to unlock.
Right, but there's also hiding in the ceiling. So like characters will like open up a door, but before they approach the door, you can like crawl up and like
which is such a movie thing. Like, you know, in all those old or those movies where the person's like wondering where to hide, they open the door and then like the main character's gone, and then the NPC will like turn away and the main character's like on the ceiling.
Yeah, but like she can actually do that.
Right.
But to go off of what you were saying, yeah, as long as you're in the shadow and it's like nighttime, like that's why there's that detector. Like the longer the bars are, the more the chances are they can see you.
Yeah.
But like if you're in the shadow at nighttime and that like eyes crossed out, doesn't matter if you're hanging, standing, crouching, whatever, they can't see you at all.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Which, yeah, especially her being like a shinobi, that's like a great feature.
Yeah.
And the other thing about the AI that I do really like, and I've actually told you this already, is in a lot of Assassin's Creed games and a lot of stealth games, you alert someone and they'll be like walking around, and sometime, depending on the game, sometimes like they'll be on their own, or sometimes if they start walking around in an alert status, others will go into an alert status. But in this game, they have they put like an explanation behind it, because if you're listening to them, one will be in alert status and he'll start to walk around to inspect, but he'll walk off to a different NPC and you'll hear him say like, hey, come help me look for this person.
Yeah.
And more people join him.
Right.
And
so you have to like take that person out before he starts calling out.
Right.
People.
And that's what's really cool, because there's not, at least so far, I haven't encountered like an alarm system.
Yeah.
Where like one person can like announce to the others, but they can go and get reinforcements. Right. Which is really cool.
Yeah. It's Assassin's Creed Shadow just overall.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's like overall it's a great game so far. Mm-hmm. It's the step in the right direction, especially for an RPG aspect. It's doing really good.
Yeah, I didn't realize we were talking for this long.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a great game. As much as I appreciated Mirage, it's still like a lot of it was right, too much of it was wrong.
Whereas I'd say this is on the other end.
Yeah, which is weird because again, it's RPG. So like my brain, like when I first found out it was going to be the RPG one, I was so disappointed.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that I'm wrong for it being an RPG. Like I'm actually enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, again, like those settings I talked about, like do a lot of heavy lifting.
The only thing we can't really talk about is the modern system, because they do have one. But we're not nearly as far into the game to really understand it. It's kind of going back to like that you as a consumer, like an entertainment consumer,
Yeah, but I think there might be more to it that
There-
we just don't understand yet.
Yeah, it's very vague, but it's teasing a lot. So
I think maybe if there's an episode after you and I have both gotten some more time with the game, we can like quickly overview some of the stuff we've learned and
right.
but I think that's a good place. You pointed out how long we've been recording. We're at 2.5 hours at this point.
Yeah.
I think it's a good place to wrap it up. But Assassin's Creed Shadows is definitely a breath of fresh air, and it's really fun, and you can definitely sink some time into it. It's a step in the right direction, and for Assassin's Creed fans or even new players, I would highly encourage playing Assassin's Creed Shadows.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. Anything you want to say before we wrap things up?
No, I mean, I'm sure there is plenty, but we talked enough already about Assassin's Creed in general, but it's a great franchise with unfortunate downfalls, but hopefully we're climbing back to a good place for Assassin's Creed, and hopefully the near future brings something just as good, if not better.
Yep. So everyone listening, we hope you enjoyed your time here with us, whether you were just driving to work or back from work or needed something to play in the background. Regardless, it's greatly appreciated if you stuck around this long. A like, a comment, all that algorithm stuff goes a long way. A rating on Spotify would be greatly appreciated. And word of mouth is probably the best way to grow our podcast. So if you've got any other people who like listening to nerds ramble about crap, then send them our way.
Yeah.
Just a little teaser, next week's episode, we're actually going to be doing something crow related.
Oh.
We've talked a little bit about it, but I think that'll be an exciting episode for anyone who's interested in like writing or like narrative creativity and stuff. I think you guys might really like what we have in store for that episode. Because hopefully it'll be the first of many episodes like it. But yeah, with that being said, I think that wraps things up. Brandon, it was nice talking to you.
It's nice talking to you too, my guy.
And it was nice having y'all's listening.
Y'all's.
See you guys next week. Peace. Peace.